Steve, great to have you here. It's been a while. Thank you for joining the Building Builders podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. It's great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Steve, to get started here, would love for our listeners to learn a little bit more about your career path and, where kind of more humble beginnings all the way up to, some of the larger projects that you've been on.
That could be a long segment, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'll keep it, somewhat succinct, but, my career was working for one company for 26 years as a general contractor, and kind of fell into it through an internship, and learned a lot. Came up through the ranks, worked for a lot of great individuals that, as mentors, I just learned a lot from, and I was able to draw from multiple mentors and their personalities and their strengths, their weaknesses, and I always just made a point to, take the strengths from everybody and just try to adopt that and build myself. And I figured with that kind of a composite, I was just drawing from the best, the best of the best. Came up through more operational roles, project manager, played a lot of time out in the field as a superintendent without being an official superintendent, which I enjoyed. Particularly that, because you're there with the workforce that is actually building the building. And that gave me a lot of perspective at a very, very early stage in my career, because, what you see from time to time are some young people come in and, they're the general contractor and they have this perceived authority, and they just come at it from the wrong way with the workforce. Like, they're telling people what to do and all of this stuff. And I just wasn't raised that way. I was an Army brat, and, you definitely learn and are conditioned to respect your elders, respect people above you, that know, more than you, et cetera. So some of my fondest memories are just literally working with the foreman of a subcontractor and just saying, I want to absorb and learn your craft as much as I can. And the only thing I want you to do is tell me what are the things in your way, and I'm going to go resolve those. And so just tell me what I can do to pave the way for you to be productive. And, just a lot of good mutual respect earned. And I'm a big believer that you need to earn that respect, and was successful doing that. And so construction, I learned in a very early stage, is very much a people business. It's relationships. It's just really getting things done with people as a team. And that, I think, did well for me. I moved out of being on a single project, being executive and a vice president with broader responsibilities across many projects, and then had the opportunity to take on a real P&L responsibility of a business unit while I was out in the Western region. And through there is where, I achieved some pretty fantastic growth stories with being, part of the leadership that grew a region from a few $100 million, and really championing the strategy to drive it to $2 billion and more on a sustained basis. And kind of the growth within that, from geographical plays that we made to break into new cities and ultimately drive not just revenue, because construction, if you're just top line focused, you're going to get into trouble really quick. You've got to really manage and optimize your bottom line, because the margins are so thin. And realistically, execution is critical to make sure that you're not writing that down. But what I learned also very early in my career is the value of the front end of the business, in terms of planning the work, the budgeting and estimating involved, and managing the design and working with the designers, because you have very specific goals. You got time to market, you got a budget. Nobody has a blank checkbook, no matter what they think. And so you've got to take this blank canvas and continuously enhance, the painting on the canvas to the point where you and your company are willing to really place the bet. I will guarantee at this point, we will get your job done on this date for this amount of money. And if I have it all wrong, it's coming off a out of my profit. And if I get it really wrong, it's coming off of my balance sheet. So it's pretty high stakes. I'm going to pause there because I know I just threw a lot in there, Kevin. So tell me which fork in the road of my career you want me to elaborate on.
Steve, it's so honestly, it really is just so impressive, and congratulations. I guess I'm curious, if there's any, young, ambitious interns right now, what would your advice be, for them to follow a similar career path?
Well, I would say, look, as an intern, you have an opportunity to just insert yourself. Just say, give me more, give me more, give me more, and take it and do great things with it to the best of your knowledge, the best of your ability. Raise your hand and ask questions. But ultimately, as an intern, I think it's the assertiveness in which you just really push yourself to learn and be a help. Nobody expects much out of an intern because, what do they really know to be able to jump into like everyday work life? But when you have somebody that just comes in and is like, I'm just here to make it happen. I'm not going to be shy. I'm not going to be asking for you to tell me how to loop, tie, and then ultimately tie my shoe. Appreciate that independence. And I think I've mentioned this all throughout my career is there's the intangible fire in the belly. And I think first order of business, if you're going to come into this business, an intern or at whatever level, be honest with yourself. If you don't have the fire in your belly to make things happen and be accountable and push forward and solve problems and take all kinds of craziness coming your way and just try to make, some degree of certainty out of chaos, then just find a different line of work. Because you have to be successful in the construction industry at large, which includes a lot. You have to have fire in the belly. That's the only way you're going to really truly excel. So that would be my advice.
I've heard that saying before, the fire in the belly, and like it's that's hard to learn. That's kind of something that you have, and another way to talk about it is maybe like some ambition and like grit is another word that reaches in there. But I think what I was hearing from you is, hey, if you are that person, if you've got fire in the belly, you're ambitious, you've got a lot of grit, take every learning opportunity, put your hand up, learn everything you can, prove that you can do it, prove to yourself, prove to everyone else, show the work ethic. And that kind of is just using that fire in the belly. I think that's what you're saying.
It is all wrapped in one.
Awesome. So Steve, did you always know you wanted to move up in the company like this? Was this your goal from day one?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. I fell into an internship. I worked for some great people, small projects turned into bigger projects, turned into multiple projects, but I kind of figured out the business of construction. I love how buildings go together and totally get into that. But more importantly, I just figured out, all right, it is a business, and the developer or the owner has an outcome that they need, financially and otherwise. The designers, they're in it for a profit, but also to have their vision turn into reality. And the GC's taken an incredible amount of risk to provide a service, and I think people don't quite appreciate how much risk they're taking for what little return they do get. But I understood the business, and I, just like my advice to the intern, I was just seeking every which way to learn every facet of the business. When I was a PM, I was in the bid room taking trades and being an estimator, even though I was doing it kind of after hours. My full-time job was being in the project trailer. But that was my way of learning the front end of the business. I'm glad I did, because that allowed my career to to grow and take on a much wider spectrum of responsibility, and then the leadership to, really take and guide a multi-billion-dollar top 10 general contractor and really drive change within it on how, we select work, how do we set the job up for success, how do we ultimately, execute and higher level strategies to foster that and to grow that in an aggressive but responsible way. And, what I loved about what I was able to accomplish led on to my now second career, because we achieved a lot of that success, both in the growth at the top line, but more importantly, by growing our margins. GC's margins are quite meager. They're definitely in the low single digits. And we were able to improve our margins by 44%, which is a lot. And a lot of that was the focus on setting the table for success in the front end of the business, because we just naturally positioned ourselves to do the type of work where the owners and architects, you were being brought in early to be a part of that collaborative team, whether it's a design build project or just a construction manager taking the risk eventually. But the focus on that is where, like I said, the second half of my career has pivoted, and there's a huge opportunity, and it's been quite enjoyable to take all that experience, that knowledge, and then apply it to something that can be more systematized and usable by the industry for the benefit of the industry. So it's a different scale, and it's just a different lens to look through, and it's a fascinating alternative to what my first half of my career was.
So it sounds like you're that fire in the belly still exists, and you're just continuing to put your hand up and learning along the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of learning.
So Steve, with this career path, is it like pretty linear? Or if you started as an intern, made it to SVP, did you knew your goal before you wanted to did you know the path at the beginning, or any surprises along the way?
I think man, you stumped me, Kevin. It's not linear. It's not linear, but it's not predictable, right? It's
right.
If you just think it's simply of like, okay, this position, then you get promoted to this, and then you get promoted to this, and there's that. That's right. Fairly easy to track in the construction world. Every company's got a different flavor, but it's more or less the same.
Yeah.
I guess what I didn't expect or predict, but certainly was positioned to take advantage of, was the fact that I did work for some great individuals, and they gave me a lot of rope, and I could, within a big, well-established, mature company, operate in a very entrepreneurial way within that. And, there's a lot of benefits to that. There can be limitations, but as long as it's balanced, I was able to do it because I think a lot of people created an environment for me to be able to do that. But then eventually you do start to see things differently, and you see different opportunities, and some people can't see that either. So, there's some twists and turns where I look back today and I go, man, I never would have thought that I would have maybe diverged from what I kind of grew up with. And then, you sit there and then you turn around and you look at it, and you kind of look at it in a different way and go, wow, I think much differently now. I think much bigger, more broadly, and there's just a lot of different ways to be thinking about these things. And so those maybe would be the more indirect twists in my career path. But, within the traditional construction, occupation, it's pretty predictable. It's pretty predictable. It can be, but What I would also caution is I think the younger generations do have a tendency to say, okay, I'm at this title. Give me the 8 boxes I need to check. And when I check them, I expect to go to the next title. And, I always struggled with that as a manager and as a leader, because it's not just about checking the boxes. It's really about absorbing all of those lessons. And some of them, it's good to get beat up a little bit. And, you've learned a lot of valuable lessons. You kind of test yourself and know how you're going to react to situations. And sometimes you just got to give that time. And I think construction is a very experiential oriented, occupation. You can't just read a textbook and then go out and do. And because it's people oriented, you have to know what you're talking about to earn other people's respect. And if you don't spend the time to be a student of that and take however long it takes to ultimately truly master it, then you're not going to necessarily get that respect. But if you just plow through it like it's about checking boxes, I think you're really missing the fun in the industry, quite honestly, because what industry has the physical stuff, steel, concrete, all the material and structural engineering and the craziness that goes into that, accounting, you got billions of dollars flowing. There's a lot of accounting that goes involved, and some lower level. I'm not going to claim that there's a lot of high finance, but there's lower level finance involved in how you should be thinking about things. And in a span of 5 minutes or 30 minutes, you could be talking to a billionaire developer who just is super successful and super smart and thinks super differently. And then you got, maybe there's a laborer that's tugging on you because they need something to finish, doing some physical labor on the job site. And so you can just very quickly pivot from one world to a different, conversation and like with whiplash. And so you learn all these things, both knowledge and, technical knowledge, as well as people and, call it emotional IQ, however you would want to capture that. It's, there's not that many industries or professions that require so many different, almost professions baked into one to be effective. So
it's, so as you know, I'm in a slightly different area of construction now, but like coming from the space and just hearing you talk about it, miss being out there on those job sites and having those conversations, the 2 different ones that you just described. It really is such a great career and very complex, very, very different things every single day and every minute on the job site. While you're talking, all I could think about was the large impact that you could have with very, like quick, small decisions, like unloading a very large piece of equipment on a road. And, say you're working in downtown Vancouver and, need to shut down a road for 5 minutes. That's a really, really high impact thing, but you're doing something very significant that's also very high impact as well. It's an exciting space for sure.
And, I think what you just brought up is a great physical example. And I think that's when people think of construction and impact and all of that. I was just having the conversation last night with some friends of a company that I used to compete against day in and day out. So here we are, we're having dinner and they're a customer. Right. So it was really interesting. But we were all talking about how there's this excess focus on the construction phase and the steel and the concrete and the physical nature of that. And that's what drives a lot of people down that particular career path. And there's far fewer people that make a career out of being an estimator or a pre-construction professional in any capacity, whether you're managing design, whether you're just a trained estimator, a quantity surveyor, or a combination of all of those things. And I think, my experience, and I always felt the need to champion the cause, they're so unappreciated. The impact that front end team has on the built environment is they themselves can be oftentimes the difference between whether a project is financially viable. Does it pencil?
Yeah.
And if they can't like figure it out and make it work, or, then the job doesn't go forward. And it's such an important role. And I find it to be one that's underappreciated, and it's different. When you're a project manager or a superintendent, you have a plan. You're executing that plan day in and day out. It's pretty well scripted. You're obviously dealing with curveballs every day, but you got a plan, and your success is measured by, did you achieve, these goals? Did you hit the date? Did you hit the budget and profit expectations? Whereas on the front end, the art is you got people that are dealing in very conceptual stuff from day one, and then they're maturing that and developing that design with more and more detail, and that budget with more and more detail. And they have to really mentally think through how it ought to be built. What do I need to factor in from a cost perspective to enable it to get built, even though that doesn't really show up on the drawings? How do I get out of the client? What are their true objectives? What are their needs? What's the ROI? And how do we maximize that for them? And if you just think about that, it's super abstract, and there's very few people that truly are geared to do that and do that well. And there's people in our industry that are doing that daily, and it's absolutely amazing. And it is literally the thing that sets a company, not just a project, but a company up for winning or going bankrupt. I mean, it lies with them. And so, as we talk about career paths, as we just talk about the industry, I'm here to really celebrate that role and just stress how important the people that plan the work, budget the work, design the work, how hugely valuable they are to the process and the outcomes. And, I think we all need to do more to support that career path and support the people that are doing it with whatever they need.
I really couldn't agree more, Steve, for sure. That is a big part of, what we talk about here on our Building Builders podcast is just the really great people out there every single day and the impact that they're having, and celebrating their success. Steve, you mentioned a little bit about estimating, which kind of leads me into my next question. I have a note here saying that you won 60% of your bids. Am I reading that correctly? Is that possible?
Well, keep in mind, bids are one thing, that's can be oftentimes a roll of the dice, and that's why most companies are starting to really get away from this bidding environment, because the real value a company can add as a builder, just keeping on with the talent that I was just talking about on the front end, is being involved early before the design is even halfway baked, and really help guide the decision making and how to really more effectively keep the design, the budget objectives and the design and the projected estimated costs more closely aligned to avoid all those surprises. And, the industry has, to the greatest extent they can, gotten away from the hard bid, because the owner and the designer are doing all of that in more or less a vacuum. Then they get the drawings ready to bid, meaning they've got a permit, shovel ready, and they put it on the street. But, there's no value to be added. And in fact, it just becomes a race to the bottom. Who's going to take it for the least amount of profit? Who's going to, basically, you're motivated or incentivized to only factor in what you can see and point to in the drawings and in the specifications. So there's no perfect set of drawings, and you're just setting the project up for arguments and even worse. So where we were successful was saying, you know what, we don't need to be in that kind of contentious part of this business, and there's just not enough of that type of work to chase and consume anyway. Let's be more, positioned for the collaborative delivery where we can be appreciated for the value that we bring. We can control our own destiny or influence our own destiny on project outcomes. And it's just a much smarter way of doing business. So when we would go after that work, it was all best value oriented. And that's about, do you have the right team? Do you have the right idea? Do you have the right, company wise, do you have the right track record and reputation and experience with that type of building, product type, whatever? And yes, when we said, out of the whole list, when we said, all right, here's the projects we're going to focus on and commit to chase, we won 66%. We were averaging 66% of a win rate when we, really focused and set our mind to winning that work. And that's all about understanding the customer's needs, the client. That's about really understanding the product type, but that's also about having the very best team, assembly of people that can be, morphed into a team if they haven't worked together. And then, helping set the table for success. And if you can demonstrate that, and if the owner can be convinced of that, then you win. And that's where we were successful, was showing the owner something different than what they were seeing with maybe the 3 or 4 other companies we were competing against. And that's where I think, and we've already proven that my company, my software company, there's a big gap in how do you differentiate yourself. I mean, everybody's got the people that can build it in a given amount of time, and they've got the resumes, but from the front end and the planning, it's just this big white space, and nobody's had a very good answer for it. Oh, I've done this project a million times. I can't really tell you, when we started it, the budget was this. When we ended, it was that. I can't really tell you what happened in between. But with the ability to demonstrate to an owner, hey, I have a process in this digital way. I've got all the data from all of my projects that I can bring to bear in an automatic way, and I can communicate with you in a way that you're going to easily understand and be able to digest the myriad thousands and thousands of cells and spreadsheets and workbooks. And people today are just throwing Excel spreadsheet and ad hoc document on top of each other. And they're just saying, hey, here it is. This is the plan. And this is the number. And you can read all through that stuff in your leisure to be convinced that's the right number. Nobody even knows how to do that. So why not do it in a different way and take all of that talent, lessen their load? Because to do all that documentation, you're talking about tens, dozens, hundreds of people hours spent just preparing all that stuff. It's data. Make it automatic. And that's what we've done. And so you can take all of that legacy project data, bring it forward. Huge value to an owner. Proof positive of, hey, over the last 5 or 10 other jobs similar to this, I can triangulate and know that, all right, I'm kind of in the neighborhood. Hugely assuring. And then visualization of where I am across the entire journey, and also being able to visualize what are my options. If I need to go left, if I need to go right, if I'm over budget, if I'm under budget, lay out the options in front of me in real time and help me continually optimize the returns or my objectives. And then how do we better communicate? All of that sets you apart to differentiate, to win the work, because what owner is going to not want, the more modern machine as opposed to, somebody who's spinning a square wheel made out of stone. And then, how do you do it in a way that you're taking less risk? You have opportunities to de-risk the deal as you go. And how do you leverage your own data to give you the confidence that you can be very precise and that you can deliver for a given range? And people right now are dealing with ranges like this. It's contingency and rounded up number and all kinds of everything else. And you're just layering in a tremendous amount of fat. And it's not for profit. It's everybody to try to protect their profit, because they know they think they're going to get hit left and right with unknowns. The data exists. It's just not in a format, and it's not structured to do anything with it. So imagine how powerful it is and how we can eliminate that layer of fat to something far more predictable. And then think about how many projects can actually go forward. How many schools, how many hospitals, how many things that our society desperately needs that people just can't do because they don't think they have enough money to do it. And I think it's a bit of a tragedy that a lot of work doesn't happen because we're just dealing with so much imprecision. And we have the ability to, to be a little bit more precise. I mean, we're sending people to the moon 50 years ago, 60 years ago, however long ago it was. And here we are, still thinking Excel is the only way to go.
So this is your company, Concentric, I'm saying
Yep.
that right?
It is.
And, you're the CEO there now. Is it any major differences, being in the tech space and being the CEO of a tech company versus your previous career?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously, the easy answer is it's way different. I mean, software versus building buildings. But once I got into it, I actually had some close friends not in the construction industry, but more in the tech and startup world. They're like, Steve, do you know how to do structural engineering? Did you do the structural engineering for Salesforce Tower? No. And, the light bulb went off. Well, software follows a similar development path as the architecture and the design of a building. And what I was really good at was managing the business of getting that building built. I didn't build it. I was managing the business of getting it built, which involved a team, which involved a vision and a mission of this is where we need to go, and let's just guide every decision to achieve the objective. And, the general design process and how you go about that, resources and all of that is, very similar conversation. So building a software platform for construction and how you plan buildings is not that too dissimilar. I don't think it's I don't think it's for everybody. Leaping from that into software, I can tell you there's nobody else probably crazy enough to make that leap necessarily, particularly at my stage of the career. But I never regretted it for a second because it is pretty fascinating. And what better way to make an impact across an industry, not just building by building and changing skylines, which I did, but how do you change the industry that I grew up in, that I love, and make it better for a lot of people. That's what really we're setting out to do.
Sounds like you're having a lot of fun there. I want to touch on real quickly. You mentioned changing skylines. You were part of the management team of some super impressive high profile projects like Chase Center, home of the Golden State Warriors, Salesforce Tower, San Francisco Park Tower. What stands out about these projects? What was it like being part of these projects?
For all of them, really, it was always fun walking the job and being associated with them. I mean, keep in mind, I was fortunate to have a fantastic team on all of them that built it. They get all the credit for the end result. But, early on, my role, as the executive officer is to make sure we have the right resources and the right, we're committed and supporting the job however we need to. And that includes making sure the table is set. And that's where I spent in that role with all of those jobs way more time, because supporting that team and thinking through the strategy of the design and, the decision making, the timing of how to go to market to the subcontractor community to get the best results for everybody. I mean, it's like a game of 3D chess sometimes. And I just loved it. And so, I'm in San Francisco in the city today, and every time coming in, I get to see the towers and I get a glimpse of the Chase Center. And I can say that for every major city up and down the West Coast and some on the East Coast. And it's rewarding. It's rewarding to know that I had a hand in it, but I will never take credit for the actual construction because the credit goes to the team. It's always about the team. But I just love the fact that I had a hand in it. And I can recount many, many stories, from every these experiences and the twists and turns you go through. And, that's the fun part of the business.
I know we've got you for a limited time. Maybe one last question. we ask everyone, what's your favorite piece of equipment?
I should have expected that from you, Kevin. Oh man. Well, you can never go wrong with a tower crane, because the tower cranes, I think we were building LA Live, and it may have been Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was the governor. It could have been the LA mayor at the time, but somebody used the phrase that was the state bird of California, because we had so many tower cranes on the skyline, and they're just very visible. But right. My very first project, huge site work project, and we had an excavation subcontractor. And again, I was the young pup. I was showing respect, and I got along great with the superintendent that was running. I mean, we were doing miles of utilities. We were blasting rock, dynamite on site, blowing things up and moving tons of dirt. And he let me get into, a backhoe and an excavator. And I was able to, grab a scoop of dirt, dump it over here. And, it was like a kid with a Tonka truck in a sandbox. And, when you've got those joysticks in your hand, you realize, oh man, the guys that do this day in and out have some skills. I mean, some of those guys can literally scratch your nose with the tooth of a bucket. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. Here I was like plunk and, half a bucket and turning around all jerky. Yeah. But you do appreciate the skills that our workforce have operating all sorts of equipment. So I guess two pieces, tower crane. And that was the other story. The tower crane, got to go up in a few of those every once in a while. And you're sitting in a cab, awesome. And when they pick something, that tower crane bends quite a bit. So you're like, whoa, were 11. I didn't get to go up into the cab of the tower crane on Salesforce Tower, because that thing stood at about 1,150 feet. But some of the other buildings, you get to operate it a little bit, and you pick just a toolbox. And right. Not a light thing, but not the heaviest thing that it picks, and just to feel and experience, how much that thing moves and bends. Like, I don't know if I need to do this for a living.
Yeah, huge respect for those operators, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Steve, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being on here with us, and looking forward to following along and seeing how things are going with Concentric.
Kevin, you're doing great things at Dozer, and we didn't touch on any of the stuff that I do in the venture capital space or any of the advisory work I do, but just seeing how successful you guys are have always set out to be, but certainly are achieving is awesome to watch. So it's I applaud you. And hopefully I can be like you, Kevin.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it. That's very kind. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.